It's important to note that this international seminar is being transmitted in real time in channel of YouTube of Europe's. You can interact live with questions and comments on YouTube chat. It's also important to say that we are live and online with guests from different countries, and eventual technical difficulties could happen. We are all living a very intense digital period with adaptations and challenges, and we hope that you understand. Let's go to today's program. We have two tables. We start with table 3 and participation of Gianna Cabello from MED and Divina Fromeig from Sorbonne University, Paris 3, France. And we have table 4 with Thomas Negrin from University of Uppsala in Sweden, Andy Dumlena from Belgium, and Paolo Selou from EAVI, also from Belgium. It's also important to reinforce that throughout the event, you can and should ask questions and comments on YouTube chat. By the end of each table, our guests will answer them live. I'd like to invite Cristiane Parente, representative from Coordination Commission of Curatorship and Partners, IANDA, Communication and Education, for some words of welcome in today's seminar. Good morning, Cristiane. Good morning, Larissa. Good morning, everyone. I would like to say I'm so happy to start this second day of international seminar. This moment that it starts spring, I would also first show my solidarity as well as our partners to all families that have been affected in any way by COVID-19. And in second place, I couldn't leave to commemorate the centenary of Brazilian education patronum, Paulo Freire, that would complete 100 years the last 19th. From the beginning of his career, his profession, he already reminded all of us of the power of the word and how important the critical view is, using the ways of communication to tell our story with our voice. How important it is to communicate horizontally, from listening to the other and creating bridges. As what he said, there are no knowledge that is less or more, there are different knowledges. This event started to be gestated by the end of 2019 as an initiative of Yanda. It's important to remind that Yanda in Tupi means us, not in an inclusive way. This event who also a group of people started and created Atelier Communication, Eunice Brasilia, Delegation of European Union in Brazil, and all the embassies that you can see, and our crew in the event on the website. Also the communication faculty and University Center IESB. There are also SOS Press, Media Observatory, RNCD, and Laboratory of Education, Language and Art from UDESC. All partners and researchers connected to culture, art, research, university. They all represent and defend a democracy, solid democracy, a democracy that respects and values freedom of press, freedom of expression, and not use this freedom to echo hate speech, disinformation, and denial, because disinformation kills and it stimulates ignorance and bubbles any society. That's why this event, that is part of a 40-hour formation that includes the seminar, our guests were selected with great care, also includes 5 workshops that happen every Saturday from the beginning of the month. We'll also create an ebook. We'd like in these spaces to discuss and learn media literacy, communication, representative, critical view, and reading of the world, algorithms, ethics, and participation of also the voices of this audience. Each one of us, as producers and consumers of communication, having such generosity shared here, do our part for a more inclusive, solidary, and responsible to create the media accountable for its program. We don't want only food. We want food, fun, art, and education. I can end this speech with Paulo Freire. Universities that are a place to education does not transform the world. Education changes people. People transform the world. Thank you very much, all the crew that has allowed this event to happen, especially Unique Brasilia and European Union delegation from Daniela Tolon and Ambassador Ignacio Ibanez. Thank you, Cristiane, representative of Coordination Commission of Curatorship and Partners. Thank you very much, Cristiane. We would like to wish a great morning for everyone. Enjoy the activities that start now. The international seminar starts the activities of this morning with Gianna Cabello from MED, Italian Association of Media Education, and Divina Fromey from Sorbonne University, Paris 3, France. Gianna Cabello will present fake news and education to media, looking to a bigger picture, and Divina Fromey, the program Emily from French Minister of Culture, 3 years. After these presentations, we'll have a moment. These guests will answer questions on chat of YouTube. So throughout the speeches, you can leave your questions and comments. First, let's know a little bit more of our guests. We start with Gianna Cabello. Gianna Cabello is a professor of University of Palermo, Italia, which teaches courses of graduation and post-graduation in digital sociology and media education. She's the president of MED, Italian Association of Media Education, and co-editor of Media Education magazine. She is also the vice president of IAME, International Association of Media Education. The fields of interest are critical theory in media culture, youth sociology, social services in digital, and media education and digital sociology. Good morning, Gianna.
Thank you. Good afternoon. From Italy, I'm in Italy. I'm located in Italy now, and it's 2:30, 2:23 exactly in the afternoon. So good afternoon to everybody.
Good afternoon for you. I'll let you take from here.
Okay. Okay, can I guess I start sharing my screen, right? May I share my screen with my...
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Please.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen. There you go.
Yes.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. It's perfect.
That's great. So I'm really excited. I'm really glad to be here with you in such an international, multinational, multicultural framework. And I'm also really happy for being here. And I do thank the Italian embassy in Brazil and Daniela Tonon in particular for inviting me for this occasion. So I'm really happy for that and proud to be here with you. I will be talking this afternoon about, as you can see from the title of my presentation, I will be talking about fake news and media education and trying to draw your attention on the bigger picture, as it has been called by a researcher. And by the way, I also wanted to say that we also in Italy, we've been celebrating these days Paulo Freire. The world wouldn't be the same if we hadn't had him. So I'm also happy for this nice coincidence also. I'm sure that yesterday you've already talked about media education and you have somehow defined it. So I won't go into it in details, but let me start with, in order to, in a way, anticipate and synthesize the kind of arguments, the kind of points that I will be trying to make this afternoon with you. Let me quote. Let me make this long quotation. You can start reading it already from this recent book. It has been published a couple of years ago, written by David Buckingham, whom you probably know. He's from the United Kingdom, and he's one of the most most active and prolific, I would say, researcher in the field of media education, media literacy education. And he has recently written this short book, indeed a manifesto, arguing for and calling for the need to have media education these days more than ever, if possible. And on the right of the slide, you can see the cover of the Italian edition of it. So if some Italian people are listening to me this afternoon, you might want to buy the Italian version if you wish. So what basically David Buckingham is trying to do with this manifesto is to argue for media education as a basic prerequisite of contemporary citizenship, as you can read, and hence as a fundamental entitlement throughout the education system. However, it also argues for a particular approach, which is the kind of approach that I want to quite synthetically be arguing for this afternoon with you. Media education is not about using media or technology as tools, as a kind of instrumentalist approach, or as teaching aids, or indeed as data gathering devices. It is not about warning young people against the various forms of bad behavior that media seem to encourage in them, nor is it simply about developing technical skills or providing young people with opportunities to express themselves through the media, although it is also that, but it is not only that. Rather, as I intend to explain, and it is also Buckingham's intention, it is centrally concerned with developing critical understanding. So let me quite quickly, make a brief historical, give you some historical notes on how, on the kind of technological change and the kind of technological culture which has been developing throughout the last decades. At the very beginning of the internet, back in the 60s or 70s, digital media were, and the internet in particular was developed within a counterculture framework. We are in the 60s and 70s. Those are the years of the hippie movement. And so the internet, the emerging internet, was seen as a place where free access to information was guaranteed, was a kind of democratic access to information and knowledge. It was in a way a kind of counterculture, the kind of official culture which was basically spread through mainstream media could be in fact counteracted on the internet, where common people could get together and create their own culture, their own ways of expressing. This was the whole philosophy, if you want, which was behind the first virtual communities, as they were called back in those days. And here, then, you can see, I've put it in this slide, people like you may recognize here Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, that very early generation who basically fighting against the major digital companies, such as computer companies such as IBM, Hewlett-Packard, and so to speak, brought in the idea of the computer and eventually the internet as something which was more personal, the whole idea of a PC, of a personal computer. In more recent times, so this is how I'm talking here about, this is why I'm talking here about cyber utopianism. There was this kind of utopian views, which in fact was not so utopian as the internet in the very early ages was practiced as a free space of expression, if you wish. And so a more recent definition of cyber culture as way for free expression for everybody and for democracy, as a way of giving power to the people, and of thinking of internet users as prosumers, that is, producers of contents and at the same time consumers of contents. That's how this neologism, as you might know, work. And a more recent definition, as I was saying, is the one given by Jenkins, Mitsuko Ito, and Dana Boyd, which you can see below my slide, which is the definition of participatory culture. That's how Jeremy Jenkins in particular defines the kind of culture that people, especially young people, being somehow engaged in some kind, whatever kind of online activities on the internet, is the kind of culture that they develop altogether. It is, as you can see, a culture with relatively low barriers to artistic expression and civic engagement, strong support for creating and sharing one's own creations with others. There is a kind of informal mentorship going on in those online communities where members believe that their contribution matters, and that's how they feel motivated and engaged in being part of that, where members feel some degree of social connection, etc., etc. So as you can see, this definition in a way brings also this idea of an optimistic approach to the internet at the very early age, at least till the mid 90s or the late 90s. Then something started to change, and we are still these days facing this major changing that has been occurring on the internet, and with the advent of social media and the so-called web 2.0. From that kind of cyber culture meant as participatory culture, in those kind of definitions that I just mentioned, we are these days witnessing a kind of the development of the so-called platform society, as José Van Dijk calls it, where and within this platform society, we are seeing more and more the development of what Shoshana Zuboff called the age of surveillance capitalism, a kind of digital capitalism, which through the harvesting of data, through a major harvesting of data, is in fact developing ever new frontiers of profit and of exploitations of the so-called creativity of the prosumers. Here you can see this sentence: if you're not paying for the product, then you are the product. This is a slogan which dates back to the 70s. It was used in the advertising industry, where they were trying to say that, especially thinking of commercial television back in those days, which was free, in fact, a commercial television, the product of commercial television is not the kind of commodities that are being sold, but it is the audience itself who is being sold, so to speak, to sponsors and advertisers. This slogan has been taken back by recently. I'm going to show you a short video from the Social Dilemma, which you might be familiar with. It is a movie or a documentary produced by Netflix, and there's been a lot of controversies about this documentary, and I'm not going to talk about it, but I just wanted to show you the official trailer, basically, where this idea of the age of surveillance capitalism, this idea of the platform society, I think is maybe in an apocalyptic tone, maybe a little bit exaggerated, but it is perfectly represented.
When you go to Google and type in climate change is, you're going to see different results depending on where you live and the particular things that Google knows about your interests. That's not by accident, it's a design technique. What I want people to know is that everything they're doing online is being watched, is being tracked. Every single action you take is carefully monitored and recorded. A lot of people think Google's just a search box and Facebook's just a place to see what my friends are doing. What they don't realize is there's entire teams of engineers whose job is to use your psychology against you. I was the co-inventor of the Facebook like button. I was the president of Pinterest, Google, Twitter, Instagram. There were meaningful changes happening around the world because of these platforms. I think we were naive about the flip side of that coin. You get rewarded by hearts, likes, thumbs up, and we conflate that with value and we conflate it with truth. A whole generation is more anxious, more depressed. I always felt like fundamentally it was a force for good. I don't know if I feel that way anymore. Facebook discovered that they were able to dissect real world behavior and emotions without ever triggering the user's awareness. They are completely clueless. Fake news spreads 6 times faster than true news. We're being bombarded with rumors. If everyone's entitled to their own facts, there's really no need for people to come together. In fact, there's really no need for people to interact. We have less control over who we are and what we really believe. If you want to control the population of your country, there has never been a tool as effective as Facebook. We built these things and we have a responsibility to change it. The intention could be, how do we make the world better? If technology creates mass chaos, loneliness, more polarization, more election hacking, more inability to focus on the real issues, we're toast. This is checkmate on humanity.
So let's go back.
Gianna, I'm so
Yes.
sorry to interrupt you. Just to let you know, unfortunately, we couldn't see the image of the video. We could listen to the audio,
Oh,
but just for you to know.
oh, that's too bad. Oh, okay.
Sorry
Okay.
for that.
I'm sorry, but it's the official trailer. I will leave you my presentation, my PowerPoint, so and you can find the link to the video there, and you can easily Google it, looking at the official trailer of the official trailer of the Social Dilemma. Sorry for that. I'm really sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So this is the, and of course, this is maybe too pessimistic, as I said, but I do believe that all our educational efforts to teach about fake news and to contrast fake news and the widespreading of fake news, I think it should be in a way framed within an awareness of the kind of bigger picture questions that have to do with media change and the development of media technology and the ever rapid development of media technology. I also wanted to show you this a cartoon that in fact, I want to compare 2 cartoons, which in a way, in my opinion, also describe quite clearly the kind of change that we have been seeing throughout these decades. This first cartoon saying, and it's a very popular one, you might have seen it already. This first cartoon was published in 1993 by the New Yorker, which is a magazine published in New York in the US. And here you can see 2 dogs, and one is telling to the other, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog, because that was the idea that somehow struck people back in those days, the fact that anonymity was guaranteed on the internet, and that you were free to be part of virtual communities, of being part of the so-called participatory culture, as Jenkins would call it, and also at the same time maintain your privacy, maintain your anonymity, as I said. But then you have in 2010 a rephrasing of this cartoon by Rob Cottingham. We are in 2010. Facebook, as already was opened and was created in 2004, and in 6 years, its development has been, huge. So that now one dog is telling to the other, how the hell does Facebook know I'm a dog? That's the whole idea of anonymity, of being free to stay on the internet, doing whatever you want, navigating wherever you want, being sure that your privacy is safe. It's gone. Okay, and so this is also a point, an interesting point that I wanted to make. And this one is in Italian, but also as a cartoon, I wanted to share it because once again, it tells you, this cartoon, it tells you the difference between 1972 and 2018. In 1972, it is the figure is that of a researcher who at the very early stage of the internet, when it was still called ARPANET, is saying, basically, this person is saying, okay, we are laying the foundations of an open network, which will allow to the computers and to the networks of the entire world to communicate among them. That was the utopian view of the internet as the network of all networks. This networking will make human beings more informed and more intelligent. That was the dream, and that was the utopian dreams in the 1970s. And now in 2018, you can see from the faces, even knowing what the little crowds are saying, but now these days, what you have is fake news, is the so-called, polarized people who, the whole conspiracy theories that are developing on the internet, like people saying, oh, the earth is flat, and I have the proof here, or once again, they're using chemical trials to modify the opinions of people. Or the last one, they're killing our children with vaccines. And this was said in 2018, and this is incredibly, contemporary these days, to enrich pharmaceutical industry. So from dream to nightmares. So what we are noticing here that the debate, the public debate around these issues has become wider and wider. So these days we no longer talk, or we not only talk about democracy, the internet as democracy, but unfortunately the internet as the reign of fake news, post-truth, global information world. We witness the so-called online radicalization, as I said, the invasion of privacy, data mining from the digital capitalism that Zuboff is talking about, online abuse, cyberbullying, all these very negative phenomena, let's face it. However, at the same time, we need, and that's why I don't want to sound too apocalyptic, and I don't want to demonize social media and the internet, okay? Because this whole idea that the media are in a way corrupting people, corrupting the world, and especially corrupting young people, well, this sounds for media educators and and scholars in the communication field and education field a bit familiar, So beware. Let's beware of the so-called internet safety industry, which somehow always lead us and lead educators to embrace protectionist approach, which will never be working. And the cartoon here, as you can see, brings us back to those years when the media were blamed were not social media, but cartoons and comic strips, and then before that it was cinema, and then it was television, and so on. So this whole idea of a media panic, for which the media are the scapegoat of all problems, and hence prohibiting access to young people to the media in order to save them, to safeguard them, well, that's the wrong approach. It was wrong back in the television age, in the mass media age, and it is wrong these days. So how do we deal with fake news these days, and how do we teach about fake news? But first of all, we don't have to think that teaching about fake news and teaching against fake news can be quick, can be easy, and can be done only by the single individual. Of course, individuals must be responsible, but it is not only a question of individual responsibility. There is a wider responsibility which must be shared with institutions, with governments who are, required to pay attention. And probably it's also a question of media reform, of finding ways of counteracting against the kind of negative phenomena, fake news being one of them, that I have just described real quickly. So if you frame fake news as a kind of quick fix and individual solutions, then we might end up missing what are the most important points. Okay, there is this need to look at the bigger picture, and the bigger picture involves, in a way, media business. So the media and digital media capitalism, the so-called GAFAM, which is an acronym which stands for Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft. These are basically the 5 giant high-tech giants who are basically ruling the internet in an almost monopolistic or oligopolistic way. So it also has to do the bigger picture with politics and the way politics and political representatives at any level are using and misusing social media, in a way fueling polarization, conspiracism, and hate speech, and so on. So also political institutions here are to be considered responsible. So it is not only a question of me as an individual. And also mainstream media, okay? Do they always tell the truth? There is this idea that fake news is only present on social media, whereas mainstream media always tell the truth. And in fact, we all know that the whole problem of misinformation and propaganda has always been there, also with mass media, with so-called old media. So it's not a question of being, able to see and establish once and for all, this is the truth, and this is where the truth is being located, and this is where falsity and falsehood lies. All media, social media, old media, are in a way inevitably selective and partial. So how do we teach fake news? Checklists are really important, of course, and you can see that many of them have been around these days. Here you can find an example of the many that we could made. So they are really very important. Are they enough? I don't think they are enough, because after all, are we sure that people, all of us, is so interested and it is so, willing to apply this rule every single moment we stay on social media? I don't think so. They are really, as I said, helpful, but it is not media education about fake news. Using simply and solely fake news may be reductionist. It is not simply a matter of teaching some fact-checking techniques based on some rationalistic assumption on how people interact with social media and with other people on social media. In most cases, we do not interact on a rationalistic base, but rather on an emotional one, an affective one, which somehow transcends and bypass rationalistic approach like the one that we are invited to take when we look at the checklist. So we need more multidimensional approach, which is the kind of approach that I'm calling for here today. And so we need to be looking at the big picture, as I said. So these are the 4 areas that whenever we look at a media phenomena, and fake news is one of them, we need to look at this phenomenon, looking at this 4 different concepts. Fake news as a question of representation, what kind of reality is being represented, using what kind of languages, and we need to develop in young people, in whatever educational context we are working, we need to develop some kind of also knowledge about the linguistic codes and conventions that are being used to convey certain meanings and certain representations. But we also need to take care of the production, that is, who has produced that message. Okay, what were the interests in producing that message? Was it an economic interest? What is a political interest? Okay, was it, were there some political propaganda reason for doing that kind of message? And also, we need to look at the audience. That is, we need to wonder what kind of audience is that message, that media message, that fake news trying to address, and how this audience is supposed to interact with that message. I know that all this is really complicated, and I'm sure that giving the complexity, and I'm really finishing my presentation, and what I'm calling here is a multi-stakeholder approach, where media educations and educators in formal, non-formal contexts, parents, families, and so on, have to make their part, although their part is not enough. Education in whatever forms needs to be combined with a process of media reform. And so public institutions have their own responsibility here, a kind of media reform for re-establishing, because the internet wasn't at the very beginning, as I quickly tried to show you at the beginning of my presentation, wasn't at all about fake news and hate speech and polarized views and so on. So we need to reestablish the internet as a public utility, as a common good, like water and air, which cannot be commodified, which cannot be privatized. And in this media reform, combined with education, we need to be looking at issues that deal with content, with privacy, with access, and with oligopoly, okay, the GAFAM kind of oligopoly that I mentioned at the very beginning. It's already gone, my time. I don't have time to talk about this last slide, but it's okay. And so thank you, grazie, thank you, obrigado.
Thank you so much, Gianna. Agradecemos muito a Gianna Cabello pela excelente apresentação.
Thank you, Gianna, for the excellent presentation. Now we will learn a little bit more about the guest Divina Fromey. Divina Fromey is a professor in Science of Communication and Information in University Sorbonne Nouvelle in France. She's graduated by University Sorbonne, Stanford University, and Annenberg School for Communications, the University of Pennsylvania. She's a specialist at cultural diversity, governance of the internet, and media literacy, as well as researches in uses and practices of media for young people and disturbs of information, radicalization, disinformation, and hate speech. She's a titular at UNESCO Sauve-Denis. She received Global Meal Award from UNESCO and Alliance of Civilization for her mock DIY meal in 2016. She's a specialist at UNESCO, European Council, and she's a co-author and co-editor of over 30 books and 300 academic articles and book chapters. We highlight Manual of Research in Media Educations in a series of publications from IAMCR and MOOCs and the Participation Challenge. Divina has directed CLEMI from 2013 to 2015. She's a co-titular of European chapter of GAPMIL and represents the interests of civil society on Forum of Internet Governance in other global areas as ICANS and WISES. She's a co-founder of and president of Support Stephanie.
Good morning, Divina. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll let you take from here.
Thank you. Thank you, Larissa. Are you seeing my PowerPoint that I've been sharing?
No, not yet. Have you shared it already?
Yes, I've shared it already. That's what I'm worried about. Let me try and see if I can do it like this. Is it
Okay,
working?
now I can see it. Yeah, is it perfect? Now I can see.
You can see the PowerPoint, or you can see the whole. Oops, I'm trying
the whole screen.
Okay, how about this now?
Oh,
Is
yeah,
better?
now, yes, that's better.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. I have made my PowerPoint in French because I'm French, but I'll speak on it in English, and I'll leave it to you to study if you want. I'm very happy to be here today to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is media and information literacy. Especially representing what we do in France, and from a perspective also of a civil society project that is also connected with the Ministry of Culture, because like Gianna, I very much believe that media and information literacy is a multi-stakeholder approach, and partnerships are crucial. So I'll try to move you fast in four times. One is a little bit the history of media and information literacy very quickly, just to understand in which frame we are. The implication for culture, because your event is about the arts and the role of art. And then the implication in terms of training and who we train in the cultural departments, and how we put forward projects and resources. So trying to provide you with a lot of examples as much as I can. So media literacy, and I'm not going to go very much in detail, sorry, but I think Gianna said a few things, but it's always been first a pedagogical project, and it's a student-centered, learner-centered project, even as far back as the 1920s and 30s. And in that sense, it resonates with you in Brazil with Educomunicação and Freire and all, and Kaplan, you know, these thinkers that you have. But it's also a political project in many ways, not just a pedagogical project, because it's about freedom of expression. Very often that's where it's connected and located in our divisions in Europe. The division on freedom of expression, UNESCO also has it there. Because the possibility of participating with media, of course. And by now, it's become a right in Europe, at least, because we have a directive on digital audiovisual media services that makes it compulsory for the states to apply media literacy. Are you hearing me well? I have doubts suddenly. Larissa?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, so as a result of this being a project, a political project, and a right, and we are now having a very different configuration, especially as we are moving towards what I call information cultures, which is to say not just media as we knew them, but also documents as we can find them on the internet. You know, you all have this one, Excel, you have PowerPoint, etc., which each carry content in different ways. And so it's not just media in the sense of the press, it's also basically knowledge of all kinds being transferred, and also the culture of data and algorithms, because we know that this is one of the ways we can find and interpret all the others online. So we have information is term used for these three kind of very different cultures that are converging. And this is what I'm trying to show you here in this timeline, where I've put the EU decisions here, UNESCO decisions here, because UNESCO has been at the forefront in 1982 with the Declaration of Grunwald. And here I've put France, but I can encourage you to put your own country if you want. And what I'm trying to show with the color scheme here, orange, blue, and violet, is those three cultures of information. Orange is for what's happening to documents, which very often is being taken up by IFLA, the big association of libraries. Blue is for media, traditional news as we knew them, and violet is for data and info data. And you see that we started here. Very soon in France, we created CLEMI, the operator of the Ministry of Education for media literacy. And we started developing schools for cinema and applications in the territories. The DACs are in the departments, and it's the art scene that is represented there. And now media are registered in our law as of 2014, and it is becoming a law because of the directive, the federal in directive. Why do we have a directive? Because of 2015, because of a big Charlie Hebdo massacre of this movie and this media, and also because of Cambridge Analytica, the Brexit, the American election. So the fact that all countries now are worried about disinformation. So disinformation is driving the legitimacy of media literacy. It started to be displaced by code, by digital literacy, but now it's coming back because of disinformation troubles, as we call them. And what you can see is that there's a convergence between the libraries, the data people, and the directive on media. So it's just to have a way of placing, if you want, the evolution of our theme. And at the beginning, the epistemology of Mill was between the political axis that we saw, protection of young people or participation, and the pedagogical axis about citizenship, but also learning by doing and a lot of creativity. So in that sense, when you were looking at a class and you heard words of citizenship, creativity, participation, you know you're not in history or in math, you're in Mill. Mill competences have been, as noted by Gianna before, about production, languages, representations, and audiences, but more and more about the factory, the information factory, about being a good consumer or not of media, mastering participation and interaction, and being able to understand disorders. So it's an increasing competence grid. What I wanted to focus on, because I was asked to speak about France, so within this large legitimacy frieze that I've showed you, France has made a sort of drastic move by 2017, 2018, because media literacy did not stay within the realm of the Ministry of Education. It moved to also to the Ministry of Culture, because media are under the protection of culture. Media development and creative industries are, in fact, covered by a Ministry of Culture. And the Ministry of Culture launched a large plan called EMIL, Media Literacy and Freedom of Expression, as a program in the section of a Ministry of Culture that is called DGMIC, which is the one about media and creative industries, because they felt they had to give the keys for critical thinking, and they added freedom of expression, because we all pushed for this idea that media literacy is about values, and by contrast maybe with digital literacy. So it was about transmitting values, especially the ones of human rights, like freedom of expression, like privacy, like participation and education. And my NGO, so a civil society organization, was able to win this public call. And so for 3 years, and it's just finished now, we have been training decision makers and several professions within culture that felt the need to have some media literacy. For instance, the director of the Louvre, the museum. Museums suddenly have been the target of disinformation, for instance. But they also realized they had a big deficit in digital culture. So we've had directors of museums in different parts of France, archives, regional directions for cultural and arts education, journalists, librarians, etc. So quite a mix, but these are all the different professions within the Ministry of Culture. And we built it by themes according to their interests. And so, for instance, it's about helping create media literacy projects in the territories of France, understanding communities online and participation, getting the fundamentals of media culture in the digital era, disinformation, risks online, privacy and data. So that was the first year. The second year, we reconducted those that were most asked and most important for them, and we added data and algorithms, and we added new digital goods, and we added online communities. So you see where the trend was going. And this last year, we have been online exclusively, around 10 days online. And we've added internet and eco media, so the environment. We've added image, because the culture of images, especially with disinformation, became crucial. And we now have a regional sessions in the framework of the forum called Entrepreneurship in Culture. All in all, it's not 500, it's 800 people that we've trained at high level. These people are replicators. You know, the director of the Louvre will then train or give directions to all his people. And so by touching these decision makers and intermediary people within the institution, we know that it trickles down. And we have quite a number of projects. I'll show you some in the regions, and they can be days of study, they can be web conferences, they can be training young people, they can be exhibits, they can be working with journalists, etc., etc. And as I was telling you, the profiles of the partners and the workers and the participants were directors of museums, archives, libraries, people responsible of training in these departments, and others, people who are in relation with the public, because one of the issues, of course, in art is how do you get in such institutions, and how do you get the young public to come there. So that's to give you an idea about this project, to show you how it's announced and people just register according to their interest. When we've been online, we've moved from groups that were about 15 people face-to-face to 80 to 100 people online. So we've been able to expand much more thanks to COVID. Sorry to report, because people had more time and had a more attention span, you know, not always interrupted as you are in an office, etc. And we've had actually very good results, though it was harder for us because we had to do all the training online, but also the workshops online. And now we're moving to a hybrid situation that might be interesting for you, where we have some of the content and the theories, etc., on the online course, and we meet people face-to-face for the workshops, and we only do project building face-to-face. So we've had to expand, modify our epistemology because of the digital and because of what we've learned with this Emile program. So you see that we've added privacy, we've added expression online, freedoms online, internet governance, and all the forms of empowerment and agency that we have now realized are taking place. So what are the implications for culture and the professions? Well, the implications are that now media literacy is visible at all levels of society, not just the top, like a Ministry of Culture, DGMIC, but also the rectorates and the DRACs, which in France are the 30 different regions that we have in terms of education and in terms of academic distribution. And so we have a lot of conventions also with Ministry of Education. They work together. And so we can have awards for journalists, we can have collaborations with different operators that usually don't talk to each other. It's trickled down to all the libraries and the documentation centers and the media libraries, down to each country, each town, each city, and sometimes we have 2 or 3. So you in Brazil who have points of culture, puntos da cultura, we are trickling down a little bit like you know, making sure that everything is also present on the territories, using the libraries as points of culture, if you see what I mean. Because the government and the Ministry of Culture in particular put in place a plan for media literacy in libraries. And that's been spearheading a lot of change and a lot of interest, because it was about modifying the missions of libraries, making them more open to other issues than just printed books, because nobody was going there anymore for the printed book. It's all online. Places, spaces that could be used by other types of actors. The ministry has pushed for a yearly organization of a conference on media literacy, for funding, for training in the regions, and for a number of experimentation with young people. They're called service civique. That's young people who are unemployed, looking for a new way of repositioning themselves, and a lot of them were interested by media literacy. And I'm not going to tell you why libraries are important to gain time, so that we can have more time for discussion, but it did revive the view on library for a lot of people. It made the libraries move from a logic of just equipping, getting more computers, etc., to a logic of users. How do we welcome users? What kind of spaces do we create for users to feel comfortable? And it definitely made us revise the question of access, how you access resources, how you access other people, how you connect with different generations. And libraries are ideally placed for senior people to come and meet younger people. And you can create lots of events around that. So, the libraries are changed into very porous spaces, and no longer somebody just in front of the book. There were soft zones where you could sit on armchairs, agoras where you could all discuss in big groups, workshop areas, game areas, and kiosks where you could just consult the news and the newspapers. So it's a lot of changes that are taking place thanks to this project. And the idea, of course, is also to create confidence again in news, in information, in the value of truth, in the face of all these information troubles. Having librarians, archivists, mediators, educators serve as a means of recreating trust by humanizing the perception of young people and making them come. And so there's been events where influencers and booktubers came back to the libraries in person, talked about their experience, etc., etc. So lots of activities there. And I also believe that media literacy cannot be reduced to just disinformation. So we never pushed for just disinformation. It's about a more holistic view. There's risks, there's opportunities, there's creativity, and there's citizenship. And all of this, educators, people who are well trained, are able to put it in place. But it is definitely via culture. We think of culture as one of the means and one of the conditions for emancipation of young people in the digital era. And for instance, the French government changed the competencies required for librarians in schools. And I hope you read some French, but I'm just going to put the number one competence for librarians now in schools is master the knowledge and the competences for media information and literacy. So putting books on shelves is no longer the major priority of librarians in France. And so it's meant revisiting their training, because a lot of them have training in the information culture of documentation, but not about media. And actually, they're rather reluctant. And so we've had to put in place a whole package where media literacy, information literacy, data literacy are recombined in one, helping them build pedagogical scenarios. And we've encouraged them to connect and mobilize with other big entities and networks of librarians, for instance, IFLA or EBLIDA, which is the European regional network of libraries. If we zoom into the disinformation situation, we pointed to them that they were not poor, but they had options. They had several types of scenarios if they wanted to put in place some situations about information. They had their own funds, their own existing catalogs, etc., and collections that they could use, and we encourage them to identify one or two, and from there look at how they could put some attention to source verification, for instance. We also encourage them to maybe look at existing resources like plugins about disinformation, or what the social engines like Google propose and reverse I, etc., and apply them to their resources. Or they could invite other actors who do media literacy, and identifying these actors is important, so that they can help you build up events, initiatives around that. And so the whole idea was, don't be scared. It's a new kind of field, and it looks dramatic, but trust on your own resources. We provided them with a roadmap where they can state their public, their themes, their objectives, their partners. And that's proved to be very useful, because it helps them identify the ecosystem of media literacy in France. And we have one. We have the Ministry of Education that has its operator, Clémy, but there's also a lot of other outside partners, like the media themselves, journalists, influencers, like huge associations like Ligue de l'Enseignement or CMEA that have put media literacy in their very large and powerful agenda. There's universities, there's a lot of actors, and that's very reassuring to them. We also encourage them always to evaluate, because if you don't evaluate and you don't show the decision makers, the politicians, and that your project works, it's harder for you next time to get funding and to get to do many more attractive things. And so we've trained them to evaluate media literacy projects as media literacy projects. Lots of people were confusing it with digital projects, coding, whatever. We said, no, careful, this is how you recognize media literacy. And we've provided them with easy tools to apply and to valorize their work, which is something that's difficult for all of us to do by just pinpointing events that exist. In France, we have, for instance, something called Nuit de la Lecture, the night of reading, where people read everywhere they want, publicly. We have the week of the press in the media. Now we have, for the last 2 years, a European week for media literacy that is aligned on global Mail Week. And there's Safer Internet, etc. So plenty of events where you can connect and show your project, showcase, meet other people, get other ideas. And so lots of interactions going on. And I'm almost done, looking at the resources, how to help build this action and buttress people and encourage them. For instance, they did a serious game. They did a video, a small television program. This is in the regions. They worked with journalists in residence, which is a very successful program where journalists can go for 2 or 3 months in a region, in a library, and work with everybody around, the libraries, the schools, the seniors, etc., etc. So very, very successful. Some YouTube channels and some resources have been selected by the Ministry of Culture to reassure everybody that they are actually interesting and not just conveying fakes. And the Ministry of Culture helped us, Savoir Devenir, my NGO, developed a series of resources besides the program that we could use inside the program. For instance, a series of 7 short videos, 2 or 3 minutes, where we explored the theme that we were going to train them in, and then provided a lot of documents to build scenarios and analyze. So we provide the video that you can see on a standalone, but you can also then go to a 3-page document that helps you use it in a different context. We also built among the projects that came out from the bottom up and from the grassroots. We went to La Réunion, which is really an island quite far in the Southern Hemisphere, just like you, where we connected with archaeologists and architects and media literacy experts to create a web documentaire, a documentary kind of web, very funny. I encourage you to go and see it. And we worked a lot with DRAC, so the local, the regional culture and art missions, especially to help young people, the service civique, the young people to be trained as little ambassadors of media literacy and to go in the schools, to go in other places. And so the idea was to trickle down and trickle up as much as we could. We also were able to win 2 European projects, but the Ministry of Culture gave us the complementary funding. One of them is UCheck, where we used a plugin provided by Agence France Presse and a group of European researchers to check fake news, fake images, with functionalities like reverse imagery, filtering, etc. And we created a serious game and workshops to go with that. Here is a serious game with 6 missions in 4 languages. And now we are on a new project, the sequel of this one, again funded partly by the Ministry of Culture, to create a MOOC, a massive online course on disinformation step by step. And we'll have 4 modules: understanding disinformation, mastering verification, fact-checking if you want, developing strategies for refutation, and building a meal project. So this MOOC, this massive online course, is starting on the 15th of November. It's open to everybody. You're all welcome to join. And the objective is really to empower people in culture, tell them that they're able to go for it and that media literacy is now legitimate, so that they can write media literacy projects, recognize them and evaluate them correctly, and invite all the other actors, especially around them, the proximity approach, including parents, to join into these projects. And when we talk with them, and that's my last conclusion, is when their feedback, these 800 people, is that the freeze, the chronological history of media literacy helped them a lot, because nobody had done it before, and it gave depth to their action and vision. They loved also the idea of values. Culture people are value-oriented. They liked the idea of training their own teams and making sure that everybody is on the same level. They were astonished by the emotional importance of information, and especially as it is seen in information culture, disinformation, sorry. And they didn't want to take just the urgency position. They were, on the contrary, pleased to use culture to raise curiosity, to push young people to want to know more, and especially by learning by doing. And they were reassured by the approach on disinformation that we took, because we put words on phenomena and events that looked very confusing. And male literacy for them was really good to transmit to young people, because they had the feeling that they were helping them make sense of the world around them now. It gave them confidence to go for it and to start, even if they were not totally competent yet. But this idea that they were not alone, they could look for partners, it was okay, and it was okay to make mistakes and to continue. So this is where we are stopping. We are now responding to the second call of this kind for the next 3 years. We'll have the results only in December, but just this interesting approach, combining Ministry of Culture from the bottom up and other sectors and other actors, is something I wanted to underline. And of course, you can go on our website, savoirdevenir.net, or contact me at divina@savoirdevenir.net if you want information. On the website, all the resources are for free. Sometimes they're in different languages, including Spanish, but not Brazilian. I apologize for that. Obrigada. And I'm stopping now.
Muito obrigada.
Thank you very much, Divina from Make, for the excellent presentation. Thank you. Now we will go to a moment of questions and answers. We had questions on chat, very interesting, about the themes here. Our crew has selected some of them. The answer time is until 3 minutes.
I've just pulled some questions that came from the audience on YouTube, and I'm going to read the question first in Portuguese, then in English, and each one of you will have 3 minutes at most to answer. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, so could we start with Divina? Sorry, let's start with Gianna, that went first panel. Okay. I have two questions for you, Gianna, but I'm gonna read them in Portuguese first. Então, a Heloísa Lopes pergunta, para você, quais as controvérsias que o documentário...
What are your controversies, dilemmas?
So, Heloísa is asking, for you, what are the controversies that the documentary Dilema das Redes, or in English, it's the social dilemma, presents? Can you talk a little bit about it, please?
So the question is about what is the documentary about, or what are the controversies about the documentary?
What are the controversies about the documentary?
Yeah, because it has been questioned, you know, it has, some people have criticized it because it is too pessimistic, because in a way does not take into account, doesn't mention at all the fact that social media are also very, very important for participation. What comes out from the social dilemma is simply all the of social media, which are there, but in fact, it's not only negative. And also the fact that social media, the social dilemma, was being produced by Netflix, by a social media platform. And so it is a kind of contradiction. There is a kind of paradoxical or situation here. A social media platform, which is somehow part of the problem, is also offering a criticism of itself. So It's not, it hasn't been accepted by everybody, although, and it is presenting a younger generation as all, corrupted by social media, using social network, which is not the case. I mean, once again, there are positive aspects there in terms of young people, for example, developing their own identity and their own sociality, thanks also to social media. And that's a quite positive element that the social dilemma does not mention. So
that's perfect. We have another question for you, Gianna. Ana D'Angelo pergunta: a educação midiática combinada com uma reforma da mídia seria uma regulação da internet? Como ela pode voltar a ser um bem comum e livre? So Ana D'Angelo asks, would media education combined with media reform be internet regulation? How can it go back to being a common and free good?
That's an interesting and very difficult question to answer. I mean, that's the whole point. Regulating the internet, it is a very, very tricky question, because whenever you talk about regulating the internet, it immediately brings about questions of censorship, questions of freedom of speech, and these are all tricky questions that cannot be easy in an easy way. There is a thin line which separates the fact that you do need to find ways to regulate the internet, and yet at the same time, this need may end up being a kind of censorship, and who is going to do this censorship anyway? Is it the government? But then here you have problems with, a kind of totalitarian government who is going to tell me what kind of expression, what kind of things I might want to share with other people on the internet. You see, the fact is that the internet, since the very beginning of it, was seen, and I think that we need to, to believe this also these days, was seen as the reign, as the field of freedom of expression. The problem is that this freedom of expression today is bringing to fake news, to all hate speech, and things like that. So I'm not a jurist. I cannot say how and what kind of legal instrument and tools we should have to somehow reform and regulate the internet. But I think that being aware as citizens that education is not enough, and that other institutions, including political institutions, needs to take their responsibility. Being aware of this is already a major step, I think. And I have no easy questions to this answer.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Gianna. Okay, Divina, okay, we have one question also for you. Eduardo de Vides pergunta: o combate à desinformação poderia ser ensinado nas escolas e nas empresas? So Eduardo is asking, could combating misinformation be taught in schools and companies? I'm going to read it again, okay? Could combating misinformation be taught in schools and companies?
Well, it depends on the project of a company or the school, in fact. We have examples where it's taught basically in schools in France. And the debate in France at the moment is, how early do we start? My answer is always as early as possible. Even small children, they actually have a lot of fun. And especially the age group 7 to 9, 7 to 10, they're just magic because they go for it. They Ghostbusters. We're creating a serious game they call Botbusters because we know how avid they are for this kind of thing. If we present it like a game, and there are some tools that are quite funny. So I think in schools, in France, it is now becoming something very important. It's not just taught as disinformation. It's always like a muscle. You have a negative, but you have to have a positive. So we put source verification as the positive, so that it's not just finding the fake and training them into that and encouraging them to bring the questions home to the parents, because at the moment it's mostly the adults really who are not trained well to fight and combat disinformation. The research shows that it's people with little education and with little internet culture that get most often trapped in the disinformation echo chambers. So that's where it is important, it's true, to do it somewhere else. So in the business, in the companies, I don't know that it's really the possibility, but in the public services, and that's why the Ministry of Culture is an important asset, making it go through culture, through professions like journalism. We're pushing journalists, for instance, now to train their audiences. They think they should go into classroom to train young people. And I'm trying to tell them, no. If you train your readers and your readers are old, you're doing the best part of the job. So it's all these reframing, rethinking how we teach and when we teach it. The directive that I was talking to you about, the directive that is also applied to Italy, gives a lot of freedom because it says media education can be done anywhere. It's not just about education. It can be done anywhere as a citizenship kind of cause. And so that's how we are going, I hope, in Europe, all pushing in the same direction.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It was amazing. Thanks for all the knowledge shared here for you.
Muito obrigada por todo o conhecimento compartilhado,
We are
por
really,
estar
really
conosco
glad.
hoje.
Thank you so much.
Nós estamos realmente muito felizes. Muito obrigada. E
Seminário agradece
sim,
muito as nossas convidadas e as pessoas que também fizeram perguntas perguntas e
like to
comentários.
thank all the people,
Também contribuíram para que
everybody that contributed in some way for all the shared knowledge. Now we're going for a brief of some minutes for you to drink some water and stretch your legs and come back to the conversation with 3 more lectures. See you soon.
Larissa, vocês já viram se o outro entrou?
Oi, Cris, você falou comigo?
Ah, não, só para ver se está tudo certinho, se já está todo mundo. Não, né?
Paulo
e Andy estão aqui já.
A gente espera 2 minutinhos e começa, né? Aí fica faltando só o Thomas, né? Ele vai entrar 11h10, que ele falou, então é o tempo dele entrar. Ele não está como primeiro, não, ele é o segundo, né?
Gente, vamos voltar? Podemos começar com...
Peraí, Cris.
Oi.
Ele é o primeiro no roteiro.
Tá como primeiro?
Thomas é.
Hum.
Vem no grupo, vem no grupo.
de Milenar. writing? Eles estão mexendo no roteiro aqui. Voltamos do nosso rápido intervalo e daremos continuidade às
We have
palestras
returned from our break and will continue
Educação Midiática e
with
Combate
the international seminar.
o papel da arte. Vale reforçar, pessoal,
We
ao vivo e online,
reinforce that we are live and online with guests from different countries and that eventual technical difficulties could happen. Thank you for your comprehension. Now we have table 4 with the presence of Andy de Melena from Mediavis, Belgium, Thomas Negrin from University of Uppsala in Sweden, and Paolo Salu from EAVI, Media Literacy for Citizenship, also Belgium. Thomas Negrin will present Civico Digital Literacy in Education, Andy de Melena from Mediave, and soon Paolo Salu. My apologies for the pronunciation. Let's keep going. After the presentations, we have a moment to answer questions from you who are watching on YouTube. So throughout the speeches, you can make questions and leave comments on chat. First, let's meet a little bit more of our guests. We start with Andy de Milena from Mediavis, Belgium. He's the coordinator of Mediavis since 2015, a project that helps citizens of flamenco communities to use digital technology and media in an active, creative, and conscious and critical form to participate in society. Cyberbullying, hate speech online, disinformation, and digital inclusion have a space in his agenda, as well as enjoying the opportunities of digital media to create, inform, and learn. Andy coordinated the vision and educational politic of the biggest juvenile movement in Belgium. He's a member of the Department Media from the group work of digital citizenship of European SchoolNet, and participates in media literacy expert in European Commission. Presided the platform against hate speech for coordination of regional movement.
Good morning, Andy. Welcome very much. Thank you for joining us today. I'll let you take from here.
Okay, thank you. And I didn't understand everything you said, but it sounded very good. So thank you for having me. I'm Andy, and I'll be talking about art and media literacy competencies. And I work for Mediawijs, which is the Flemish Knowledge Center for Digital and Media Literacy that's been around since 2013. And if we say Flemish, that means the northern half of Belgium, where we speak Dutch, the southern half of Belgium speaks French, but also that we're government funded. The Mediawijs was started at the initiative of the Flemish media minister. If we say we're a knowledge center, that means that we're research and best practice based, supporting the field in reaching the public, and digital and media literacy. We always take them together because for us in this day and age, we don't think they can go apart anymore. So they're two sides of the same coin. If we look at media literacy in our country, or in Flanders at least, we see that 4 sectors or 4 kinds of activities came together to form the field of media literacy in Flanders. It's digital or e-inclusion, it's online risks or e-safety, it's digital information, everything about that, especially about fake news and disinformation nowadays, and it's media arts education or media cultural education, which is the term that is more often used here. These 4 fields came together and they became digital and media literacy. And for us, it's a quite recent story. It's only been around about, I think the earliest discussions in Flanders about this started 15 years ago. And we don't have this wide tradition of media education that some of the other speakers have already shown you. So for us, often, we started with the digital media and went into more other media afterwards. Now, in the start of our center, digital inclusion and online risks were the main topics in our work. And then we saw that propaganda by ISIS and fake news and Brexit shifted that from digital inclusion, went a bit on the back burner, and digital information came much more to the foreground. And then now with the corona lockdowns that have been around in the last 2 years in our country, we saw that digital inclusion was much more apparent again for our policymakers and came back to the policy forefront. But what you see here is that media arts education is the one that keeps being left out. It's although there are some initiatives there, it certainly is not at the foreground of our policy. So that is something to keep working on for the next few years. And I do wonder if the people who are watching this today, if this is the same for them in their country. Now,
sorry,
yes,
excuse me, Andy. Sorry
yes,
to interrupt you. I just wanted to kindly ask you if you could speak a bit slowly for our translator, because
okay.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
No problem. Just going into the definition of what we see as media literacy in Flanders. And you see here that it is defined as a competency. And that means the whole of knowledge, skills, and attitudes to act adequately in a certain situation. And that situation being here, the mediatization and the digitalization of the world. And adequately is then actively, creatively, consciously, and critically. To make this more concrete, we put this into a competency model where you see the 4 elements: actively, creatively, critically, and consciously again. And outside of that model, you see the functions or the goals that are that we think media and digital technology are especially used for or useful for in our society, and to be a happier citizen. So it's informing people or informing yourself, interacting with somebody or interacting with the government or a web shop, creating all kinds of things, entertaining yourself or entertaining others, and fending for a cause you believe in or defending yourself against all kinds of harm. Now, if we look more closely what's behind these words, actively for us, it means the skills to operate the technology and the applications. It means access, navigating. It means that you can find your way to the things that you want to see, want to hear, want to use. If we go in creatively, it's organizing your surroundings and yourself to start creating, and organizing also the contents that you have found, and then going into producing and really making media or making other digital things like what you could do with a 3D printer, for instance. Now, critically, there we observe what happens when we use media and digital technology, and then analyze what the consequences are of this use. And consciously means that you evaluate if you think these consequences are positive or negative, and then reflect on the things that you should change, be it in your own behavior or maybe in the society around you. Now, next to this competence model, one thing we always want to stress is that it is very, very important in media literacy to do things age appropriately. And that means that we can't expect teachers or people in kindergarten to be already fully equipped to battle disinformation and fake news. But that we really have to look at what is age appropriate according to the psychosocial evolution of a child, to teach them and what they can handle at what age. So for us, it's more, if you really want to go into problematizing information and disinformation, you will more than likely be talking about children in secondary school. Another thing is, if we talk about digital technology and media within art, is also a question of, is it a tool or is it an object of art? Is it a tool to make art, or is it an object to look at? Is it art itself? And for us, it's quite clear that it is both. Now, if I go more to a practical side within our competency model, I will start with actively. One of the questions that there are a few questions there if we want people to be actively involved in media literacy and art. It's the question of access. digital access, digital inclusion. You can do a lot with a basic smartphone, but does everybody have one? Do they have connections to the internet? And do they have the basic skills to actually create something with it, or are they just consuming social media or games? Another access is also provided by the collective. Some things are just too specialized or too expensive to do, and then you can share. This means that like STEAM Fab Labs, Media Labs, or Open Digital Centers can play an important role there, maybe even within the library context, which in our country often try to organize these kinds of things. There's also the question of special groups, people with disabilities or children in youth care or other special target groups, and what you can do. An example here in Flanders is Linken de Kabel. It's an organization that specializes in workshops and training for care institutions. So for young people with disabilities, they do workshops in the institutions. For the people who work with these young people, they give trainings on how to do these digital things themselves. And there's also the question of access through what governments may decide or what platforms may decide that you can have access to. Here you see that China bans reality TV. It's more specifically, it was these kinds of reality contests to be the most talented person in the country, where there was a very commercial aspect of buying lots of merchandising to let your candidate win. So maybe at that point they had a good idea to do something there, but they do choose to do a lot of interference in what media can show and what they cannot show. And they also want males to be represented much more as manly. So they get involved quite a lot, which is quite extreme. Now, also, if you look at Trump, he also tried to ban other digital things. TikTok, which is the strongest, which is getting most young people getting new young people online and on their app the fastest at this time. It was Trump tried to ban it. And again, there's the question there, is this a good idea for young people who want to express themselves, make all kinds of content, if the government starts to censor this? And there's a lot of questions that you may ask. There might be good ideas in censorship, but there often are mostly bad ideas in censorship. And then there's the question of quality guidance. Where can we find the tools and examples that we need? Like a specific example is Jeff VZW, which is a youth film organization. And in a lot of countries in Europe, there are youth film organizations or institutes that provide the guidance towards the films that young people might enjoy more or that they shouldn't miss, going beyond a very commercial menu of films. There's organizations like Common Sense Media, but they don't look at the artfulness of a certain medium as the most important criterion. They are mainly concerned about making it safe, making you a good parent by showing you what is a good thing for your kids, or making young people good citizens by giving them good content that provides that. But really, quality guidance to what the best objects of digital art are, the best art games and all these kinds of things, that's still a gap in our society if we look at art and digital media there. There is an initiative in the Netherlands, at the Youth Film Festival there, Cinekid, that has the App Lab, where they give advice on what apps are really very artful for children, very good apps that have to do with arty aspects for children, but we're still missing a really guidance function towards art and media, digital media here. If we go into creatively, I would advise you to have a look at the work of David Gauntlet, who has this book, Making is Connecting, and who really stresses the fact that daily creativity is a process. It's not really something that you should be looking at from the what the product is of it, but it's really about the process that people have and the fact that making things makes people much happier. Someone like Susan Jeffers said that the doing it, and she was talking about making stuff, comes before the feeling better about yourself. So it really helps you in your well-being. Modern media is, if we talk about media literacy, we often think about making all kinds of media, but you can go much further than just making media. You can also try to make media art or digital art. And Jeff Vezetwe, which I already talked about, Youth Film Organization, does workshops in hospitals with with children who are there for a long time, making their own 3D VR films. A very interesting organization is Nerd Lab, which is kind of an open youth work, an open STEAM lab for young volunteers, and it's where they make art with digital technology. That's really their goal. And they've also been working on the methodology behind that, the theoretical and the practical side of it, in the last few years, where they stress community building, design thinking, and how to design the right makerspace to facilitate this. Now, this is a little video I will try to show you. I hope you can hear it and that I did it right. I think it's about 10 years old, but it's also a very interesting aspect for me of digital media and art.
What you just heard are the interactions of barometric pressure, wind, and temperature readings that were recorded of Hurricane Noel in 2007. The musicians played off a three-dimensional graph of weather data like this. Every single beat, every single colored band represents a weather element that can also be read as a musical note.
Now, what you see there is the possibility for artfulness within data. And data is one of the most prominent ways of providing information through digital technology and media at this time. It's also going to be much more prominent. We've been talking about this for years when it was about algorithms on social media and saying data is the new oil. But with the advent of more and more AI applications, artificial intelligence applications, data will become much more important in our information provision. And what you see here is that you can use data to make art, visual art, 3D art, but also music. One of the volunteers at Nerd Lab, he makes music from the sound that planets make while they are moving around the galaxy. They make certain tremors that you can register on Earth, and then from those tremors you can translate that to music. It's a very interesting project of what all the things that you can do with data are. Now, from creatively, we'll be going to critically. And there you can do all kinds of things with art. You can look at the history and see where our imagery from nowadays, or although Superman isn't that modern anymore, but okay, from nowadays you can see that all kinds of superheroes in comics use poses that were used by saints and by Jesus himself in earlier paintings. Also, Superman flying is he flies in the same way as saints in paintings used to do in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. You can look at what AI is doing with deep fakes, with all kinds of art now. You can have photographs, but you can also have paintings. You can make them talk to you now. You can. There's lots of the things to be done there, and you can think about what is real and what is not. And then there's also just looking at the dynamics of art itself, especially of visual art, where you can see that the building blocks of visual literacy that are used here in one painting of Napoleon or in the other painting of Napoleon paint a totally different picture, so to say. Now, other things is that art has been showing us that you can be duped by visual tricks. It has been showing us that for years and years, and now we see that digital media also does the same with us. Now, for that, things that you can work on are things like visual literacy, looking at art and media. And we've made this interactive video with in Belgium famous director, a good cameraman, and a good editor of movies, where they talk about what the building blocks of visual literacy, framing, perspective, distance, light, editing, and also enhancing your images mean for them in their work. And you can use these building blocks to critically look at art or look at media or look at all these kinds of visual impulses. You can also go back to creating and use the building blocks to create things. Now, these building blocks, it's not always easy to talk about them, or just very getting young people enthusiastic to talk about them just by saying, well, what do you think about this building block or this building block? So visual thinking strategies is one of the ways that you can go about it. It's something that was developed within the museum sector, and where you look at images in group and discuss them with 3 questions that you keep on asking. These 3 questions again and again and again. So you ask the group, what is happening in this image? You never just say, what do you see, or what is in the image? You say, what is happening in this image? And then you ask, what do you see that makes you say these? Because these are the arguments that give you, that they can give to really show you what is happening in the image. And then there's always other things happening in the images as well. So besides just focusing on the first thing that they say, you can go, what else is happening? And again, you can start this cycle of questions. Another thing that we see is that audiovisual media, be it films or archival material, is often just used as an illustration in the classroom. Whether you go in the history class, texts or a letter, they are critically analyzed in the classroom, but the images and the videos, they are often used without questioning. They're just an illustration. You show one image and you say, well, this is what the Middle Ages in Europe looked like. A period of 1,000 years is very difficult to just illustrate with one image. But then that's why we made an interactive video together with our digital visual archive, MIMO, about the questions that you should ask as a teacher, or that you could ask together with your students about these images, about this archival material, about these videos that you are using. What was it? What is it? Who made it? Where did they make it? When did they make it? And so on. Another thing that you could do is use the tool that was created by René Hobbs, Mind Over Media, where you can, which looks at propaganda in the classroom, and where you can upload an image and rate it with the classroom from harmful to beneficial. You could also do this for art, because art historically and contemporary as well often has a propaganda function. Or you could use visual literacy as a media literacy en plein air, which means that you use these visual thinking strategies outside while walking around. You could look at heritage objects, you could look at statues, but you could also look at a tourist shop and see how you are commercializing as a region, a city, or a nation, your own identity, and what image that you are propelling within this kind of setting. Now, if we go from critically to consciously, it means that we will be looking at the consequences of using all these media and art, and we're also reflecting on what we want to change there. And you could see art as a reflection in itself. If we look at the first image there, it is a large reflection on what is real, what is the worth of an image, how far does it go, how can you let you reflect on it for yourself further. But you can also reflect on art itself. And you see here a statue of the man who is measuring the clouds. Now, this statue is a bit of a controversy in our country at the moment. It stands on top of a cultural building. It's quite a modern statue. It was made by Jan Fabre, and Jan Fabre has been accused by people who worked for him for sexual harassment. So he has a lot of these statues on different statues on cultural buildings. So some cultural buildings are now choosing to remove them. Others are saying it's not that it's not necessary to remove the art itself. But it also reminds us a bit of the discussions in the United States and also in our country about statues of generals that were fans of slavery, or our own King Leopold II, who colonized and was responsible for the colonization of Congo in Africa. So there's a lot of reflection, societal reflection, that you can do on art objects itself. Or you could reflect on the words of artists themselves. And you see here Kirel Benzi, who is a data art, and he's very enthusiastic about that. But he also says, because this art is based on data, the piece has a more objective truth behind its construction. And I think that is a very bold statement, that if we look at everything that we know within digital and media literacy about data and about the use of data and the collection of data, then we can have a very big discussion and reflection on that statement as well. We can use art as the expression of the reflection. And if we're doing this with young people, we might want to choose some forms of media art that they enjoy a lot at this time, which is TikTok movies on the one hand, or memes on the other hand. If you don't want to use TikTok, you can also go to something like Flipgrid, where you have a more educationally, you can close off the environment and use it in educationally, but you still make these kinds of videos, and you can have interaction with these videos within your group that you have defined then. But if you are using art and images and memes and TikTok videos online to express your views, I think we should also go back to some things from digital literacy and media literacy that we are already working on a lot. And it's how you are using them online. What messages are you putting online? Are you attacking somebody, or how are you reacting to what somebody else is online? What is your own behavior online, and are you being on your best behavior? Are you making the most constructive community online that you can? And there are lots of tools and lessons already available on hate speech, on trolling, or on polarization, or on cyberbullying, and so forth, on not sharing private images of other people. And there's a large collection of tools that you can use for that within the Safer Internet community. And there I will be finishing this talk. So I thank you very much for your attention, and I'll be here for some questions if there is time.
Thank you so much, Andy. And I apologize for the pronunciation on say your name. And please join us after these two next panels for the question and answer moment. Nós agradecemos muito.
Agradecemos. Thank you very much, Andy de Melena, for the excellent presentation. Now we will know a little bit more about Tumas Nagrin from Uppsala University. Tumas Nagrin is Senior Professor of Didactics in the University of Uppsala and Associated Professor in History specialized in Science of Education from University of Vilnius. His interests in research include education for international comprehension, historical thinking, understanding digitally, and critical thinking of human rights. He is the leader of research from projects, I apologize for the pronunciation, Neuhitsvadihahen and GACA, and is a specialist in a work group from European Commission to Digital Literacy Against Disinformation. Welcome, Tumas. You have the word.
Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll let you take from here. And please, just to remind you, if you could speak slowly, just to help our translators. Is that okay?
Okay, thank you. I will try to speak slowly. I'm not a slow speaker, but I'll try to hold it slow.
Thank you.
And so I will be sharing my screen now and show you the Brasilia PowerPoint. So I will be talking about digital civic literacy in education and some of our research that we've been conducting on this topic. But I will start by having someone else talk. By the way, I need to just double check that I get this right. Every time you share, you need to make sure that you also share the sound. There you go. Okay, here we go. Listen carefully. He has some important, this is an important message from Mark Zuckerberg.
I wish I could keep telling you that our mission in life is connecting people, but it isn't. We just want to predict your future behaviors. Spectre showed me how to manipulate you into sharing intimate data.
Oops. Something went wrong.
I wish I could keep telling you that our mission in life is connecting people, but it isn't. We just want to predict your future behaviors. Spectre showed me how to manipulate you into sharing intimate data about yourself and all those you love for free. The more you express yourself, the more we own you.
So that was a fake video of Mark Zuckerberg that was posted by Bill Posters, who, as a critique towards Mark Zuckerberg not taking down fake news on Facebook in 2019. So you can actually hear what he's saying, and it looks kind of genuine. Nowadays, you can make much better deepfake videos, and you can actually trick the ones who are the best at this. And you can see from some recent research that the people who are the best in technology cannot detect fake videos themselves, but they think they can. And this goes in our studies as well about young people, and it goes for media analysis as well, that there's a problem with people thinking that they are good at navigating online information, but they are not. The most confident ones are sometimes the ones who are tricked the most. Today, we can download apps and easily create deepfake videos ourselves, and I think you've been seeing some today already and yesterday. And we are facing a real challenge here, where rumors online can support genocide, as in Myanmar. Rumors may fuel lynchings, as it did in India. We've also seen this in the Swedish election, that rumors have been posted online about election frauds. And we've also seen how Russian trolls have been trying to manipulate the American election. And we've seen the storming of the Capitolium. So there are some serious issues here. And what we know is that people with different backgrounds are more easily tricked than others. When we look at the information about COVID-19, we see that the ones who are best at navigating information about COVID-19, those are older females. The ones who are not as good as this are people getting information from social media. And this study was conducted in Ireland, Mexico, Spain, UK, and the US. Learning from this, we also see that the ones who have a self-perceived minority status are more skeptic towards governments and towards credible information about COVID-19. And I guess that this comes from a skepticism in the history where they have been given some lies about what is going on regarding experiments, etc., coming from the governments. We also see that the ones with numeracy and trust in scientists are the ones who get most correct when they are supposed to be looking at misinformation and true information about COVID-19. So there is a challenge here, and we can't have everyone be speed up and become older women immediately. So we need to focus more on education. In Sweden, we have been looking at how big is the issue among younger people. What we see in our large-scale study of 10,000 students, when they go to their own news feeds, helping us to scrape the data, we see that for the most part, they actually get their news from credible, established news media. We see a problem in Sweden because the students could not reach the most credible news because it was behind paywalls. Only the ones who had parents paying for subscriptions could get the most credible news. But now this has shifted. The most credible morning newspapers in Sweden have now taken down their paywalls to high school students, so they can now read it for free. We also see that it's very complex when it comes to evaluating credibility. It's a practice with many levels, and simple keys and checklists about how to do source criticism are not enough to navigate digital news. When we did a survey on how skilled Swedes are at navigating digital news, we would feed them with misleading news and credible news, and they were supposed to be evaluating them. Here we find that for the most part, the ones who rate access to credible news as very, very highly are the ones who are best at this. We call this credibility importance, and it seems to be key across all our experiments that if you have a mindset that it's important to have access to credible news, then you are also better at debunking fake news. We also see that higher education could help. Also studies in humanities and arts, natural sciences and technology. Also, people who have been working with fact-checking are better than others at fact-checking, which might not be much of a surprise to you. Predictors for poor performance is actually if you're a young person who have a high self-rated internet searchability. So what we're seeing is a bit of a Dunning-Kruger effect, overconfidence syndrome among the students. The same thing as we saw as in the deep fake study. So this is a problem of arrogance actually, and not knowing your own limits. And we see that the ones who see online information as quite credible are also not very good at navigating information. This is the free access to morning newspapers in Sweden. So what we are looking at and what we're finding so far is that digital civic literacy have some key aspects. We see that there is a digital divide. We have people with socioeconomically poor backgrounds who are not very good at navigating information. We see that there is it's very important that young people learn the importance of reading and finding credible information. This might be more important than actually being good at source criticism, is knowing where to find good information and following good information. When it comes to critical thinking, we see that you can actually support students' pre-bunking skills by having them play games where they are the manipulator themselves. I will tell a bit more about that later. And we're also finding that it's good to teach students to become fact checkers and fact check more like a pro, which is called debunking. So there is, what we see here is a very complex issue. There's no quick fix in this, but I will still tell you a few quick fixes because that's what we research about. And one of the first things that I need to tell you is that what we do when we try to understand how education can support students' digital civic literacy is that we go into what we call design studies. Design studies are test beds for innovation, and the intent is to investigate the possibilities for educational improvement by bringing about new forms of learning in order to study them. This is based strongly on prior research and theory and carried out in complex, messy classrooms and schools. So what we do is that we go into classrooms and we test the designs that we have, new technology, new types of teaching methods, and then we evaluate, we redesign, we test it again, as you do in any design. What we have been testing in Sweden and in other countries is the bad news game. This was originally designed at Cambridge University in collaboration with Droch in Holland. Now we've tested it in Sweden and it's actually available in Portuguese. I think that you should send them an email so you can actually get a Brazilian special edition of the Portuguese version. But if you play it, you will find that the game itself tells you that you are now the manipulator. You are the one supposed to be tricking everyone else to believe in your fake news. So you play on emotions, you become an imposter, you spread conspiracy theories, and you learn all the tricks. And what we see in research is that after playing this, which takes only like 15 minutes, the players become better at debunking misleading tweets. And at the same time, they continue trusting more credible information. Another way of supporting digital civic literacy is to test is to use the plugin which is called InVidVerify. InVidVerify gives you the opportunity to right-click on any image, and then you can use multiple search engines. For instance, if you would right-click and use Google reverse image on this image to the left, Google will give you this. This image seems to be dealing with terrorism. If you do the same thing with Bing, another search engine, then it gives you this instead, because the algorithms differs and the design of the database is different, or the search engines is different. And coming from this, we can click us through, and we're finding that this is actually not a terrorist at all. It's a manipulated image of a human rights activist. And here they put him on a bomb jacket, and they made his tablet into the Quran, and they've actually put something nasty in the background as well. When we introduce this tool, the InVidVerify, in classrooms, we ask students also to do forensic searches, because the tool in itself helps you analyze images with the help of AI. We have teaching materials that looks like this in 4 different languages, where we support students in the learning, and then they will come out with a better understanding about what is happening. I think that Divina has already talked a bit about this. So anyway, this is something that you can do in classrooms, and we find that it actually has a significant impact on students' learning. We've also designed a self-test, which is called the News Evaluator. This comes from the strategies of debunking information like a fact checker. So what we did was that we gave a pretest to students, and then we gave them some general information about what to do as a fact checker. Look at the source, look at the evidence, compare to another source online. We did a pretest, they got the general information, and then they did a post-test on these types of items that you see before you. The outcomes from this was nothing. So we had to go back to the drawing table, and we had to redo it, and we figured that maybe this has to do that the feedback was too general. Maybe it needs to be more specific. So we ended up with a new design with more specific feedback and test items. And now it works. So for instance, you will see this image of a kitten, you would rate it, then you will be given feedback as in a short video clip, and you would also get written feedback on your response here. Now, giving that feedback, we see now that the ones who do get the feedback are much better than the ones not getting the feedback. And this is published in a research journal already. We are now continuing to better understand what is going on. What types of feedback is the best feedback for students to get? And we were previously giving everyone video and text as feedback. And what you see in the image before you now is that if you are given both the video and text, then it takes more time to understand the feedback, and you might not become better skilled than in the only video condition. So sometimes it's better to just have a video without any subtitles. Oftentimes it's better to have a video and no text. So what we're seeing here is that it's important to have feedback that is not giving a cognitive overload among the students. And the best feedback seems to be just video. Giving them the text feedback is not as good as it is having the video. Collecting and looking a bit broader on what we know in educational sciences about disinformation, I find a few things worth mentioning here. First of all, great schools for all is very important. if you have a population where everybody gets good schooling, then that is helpful, because if you know a lot about a subject, you're harder to trick. So knowledge and skills go hand in hand, and we must always support good schooling in general. We're also finding that in research where they compare how much people understand them when they read on screens and versus when they read on papers, we see that when you want students to learn new things, then it's best to read on paper. So don't throw away your printed books. And in Sweden, they've been conducting some evaluations about the schools in Sweden, highlighting the importance of not becoming all digital. You must give the students also information on papers and books. Reading a lot is great. So if you help people to read more, if you help support the small ones to read, then they will also be better at navigating this information. As I mentioned previously, I think that in schools we should focus quite a bit on teaching the students how to find and follow good sources. Where can I find credible information? Not focus too much on becoming critical, focus more on learn on the facts and where to find good information. And then of course, on top of that, as the previous presenter said, in upper secondary schools, that's when you could become more critical, but you need to have a solid basis on knowledge that you can trust. We're also finding that it's important in education to support curiosity and open-mindedness. And digital civic literacy can be supported in education and in games. And we're seeing that if you have some short interventions teaching students pre-bunking, for instance, by playing games, and debunking, learning to fact check like a pro, or doing reverse image search with Reverify Invid, then students can become better at navigating online information. What we are looking at now is the importance of technocognition. Knowing when you need technical support seems to be key in the future. Since the best designers themselves cannot, with a naked eye, debunk deepfake, then we need to understand, okay, I need some help here. I need to have a tool that can help me analyze the image, analyze the video. So this is partly one of the approaches that we are looking at currently and ahead of us. When it comes to evidence-based digital resources, there are not that many out there. There are a lot of good things happening, but so far, not that many that has been scientifically evaluated. And here are some examples that comes out in English, where you can look at evidence-based research that can be digital and support digital literacy. And this concerns maths, science, the news evaluator, the bad news game, and the U-Check materials. So these are all materials that you can use and which has been tested by researchers in practice. So, and with that, I am finished with my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy. And I invite you to stay with us for the question and answer moment right after the next panel.
Thank you. I'll stop sharing then.
Ok, agradecemos muito a Thomas.
We would like to thank Thomas Negrian for his presentation. Now we're going to learn a little bit about Paulo Selou from EAVE from Belgium. Paulo Selou is a specialist in media and a founding member of EAVE, an European association that is active in media and related citizen theories. Paulo in media. Before that, Before moving to Brussels, he was a part in radio in London and Milan, and also working in BBC and private channels and publishers. In all Europe. He's also a part to be of consulting, including the European Union, the Audiovisual Europe Observatory, and the Directive Committee for Media and Society of Information and European Counseling. He contributes to conferences and collaborates in different networks and organizations. With the words now, Paulo Selu. Welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll let you take from here. Just to remind you to speak slowly, please, so our translators can follow up. Is that okay?
Thank you, Larissa. Yeah, indeed, it is okay. I am in the last part of the day, so I'm a bit tired, so I will be slow. And so it will be a win-win, is easier work for the translator. I am, in fact, I was wondering about what could be more useful to your audience at this stage of the conference. I think I am the last speaker. You have had excellent presentations. I really enjoyed most of them today and yesterday. What I will do is different from what I had envisaged. I'm not sure about the point of departure, the knowledge, the level of details that would be useful. So I have decided now that I will go a bit back to basic things, offering a bit which is my experience here in Brussels. So we have been working for EAVI, the organization I'm working for 15 years, possibly more. Also with some of the speakers that you have had today. And so I will tell you what I think it is more important at this stage. 15 years ago, technology was different. The online world was different. The way in which you were winning elections was different, and these relate a bit, and I congratulate, in fact, the organizer of your event to have associated the words media education, disinformation with art, because art is important. Is the new concept that we are using here at EAVI. We haven't called anymore media literacy because people don't understand what is media literacy. We have tried hard, but it's certainly our fault. And we try to find a concept that was encompassing a much broader context, is not only skills, but also attitudes, also values, and it could not be confined into a rigid definition. Is Andy before is show a very good framework about all the different criteria that make media literacy. There are many around, but for us it was it is important. Gianna Cabello before was mentioning David Buckingham and his Manifesto of Media Education, pointing out rightly that critical understanding is the core of
I föreläsning och lyssnar. Jag vet inte.
I think, Thomas, your microphone may be on, and so I don't dare to say something different from David Buckingham, who is obviously an expert having worked on this for authoritatively for so many years. But for us, the key word is not anymore critical thinking, but is awareness. And this relates to what I was mentioning before about getting back to basics. Europe is not getting any more media literate. There is some evidence that is showing that, in fact, the power of disinformation and propaganda is increasing, and the tools that citizens have available are in fact not sufficient. So for us, the key word is awareness, is consapevolezza, consciousness. I don't know how you would translate this in Portuguese, but and this is another problem of this global media literacy. Words are important, but each country has its way to define and to use a terminology. So for us, it's important to develop a skill of being attentive to distractions, of being aware of what is happening around us. This in itself, our behavior online, this in itself, it is not sufficient, but it's the very first step to become media literate. To be aware of a problem is the first step to solve it. And so be aware that it's not you that are choosing which movie you are watching on Netflix, being aware of all this manipulation and propaganda, surveillance, privacy. Before it was mentioned about the Social Dilemma movie. Thomas is quite rightly point out from what the research is showing. So what I want to say is that media literacy and the fight to disinformation is not just a rational process. It is related to humanism. You mentioned already your Paulo Freire. This is we only exist in relation to each other. I think that is the exercise of fighting or becoming a better citizen. It starts from ourselves, and there is a lot that we can do even before accessing tools and resources. So, and it is related to emotional intelligence, to creativity, to many things that have already been mentioned. Then we will be able to use the media more as a personal resource. So talking about resource, I will in a moment, because I think that this can also be useful to you, I will provide the link where you can download the book that we have just finished writing, which is the result of a 3 years long project on how to become a media literacy teacher. And we have, we will show which is the approach, the methodology that we have used in 5 different countries to train 100 teachers per country. So it is international by definition, and the problems that we have encountered and the solutions that we have found. So this will be in a moment. And in fact, if I share it, it could be even now. Let me see if I share my screen, and which is here and there. So forget about these slides, and this is what I was mentioning before. I hope that you don't see this. And maybe not even the chat. So let's forget about all of this stuff. This is the book that I was referring to. So it's 144 pages long, and you can download it now. And we decided to make it available in the spirit of media literacy, so that we can share information. I want to get to, these are another couple of projects that we are on that are more specific. Again, you will have time if you want to go to the respective websites. This is on children and how they can be safe online. A long discourse about children and being online. I remember, I just want to say that is a conversation I had with Sonia Livingstone, in which she said that children don't need to be taught about privacy. So it's quite a controversial issue, but maybe they are wiser than we think. This again is relates more to art, actually, and digital culture has also been mentioned before. But I will skip this and I will go to what we have called the AVI test, and this a way in which we want to find out whether people, including experts, they are actually aware of basic, very important, crucial information. And the test is factful in the sense that the replies to the test are not subject to interpretation. You can have it go. And so one of the questions is how much time we spend online? And the answer is, I don't know if you want to try, count until 3. 1, 2, and 3 is the right answer is that we spend almost 20 years of our life online. It means days of 24 hours, day and night, is an enormous amount of time in this digital environment. And obviously, what does this imply? Thomas was mentioning that studying on a paper book may be more effective than learning from a screen, or probably the two combined is, but yeah, let's not throw away the books that we have at home. I hope my pace is good enough for the translator. I go to the second, another question. In fact, this is the 7th one, is to show that there are an enormous amount of fake accounts that are deleted every day, and only Facebook, and this is a data that refers to 2020, but for 3 months only, is taking out almost 20 million accounts per day, 20 million fake accounts per day, only Facebook. And this should give you the idea of the magnitude of the issues that we are dealing with. Remember that this was one of the main strategy, successful one, to win some elections. And if for those that want to know more, there is a discipline that is called strategic information that is that study how to influence the citizens that are living in a foreign country. And there you have Russia, China, and Europe, and the States, South America, and so forth. So the issue is, to say the least, global. So I skip a few slides, but I want to mention this because also it was taken before by some of the speakers, which is the balance in between disinformation and freedom of speech. Am I allowed to say what I want when I want it? Which is the limit? And you, for sure, you remember what happened not a long time ago when what he was the president of the United States encourage hate and invite people to walk to the Capitol, which is the American Parliament. And he was using factual lies. Obama comes from Africa and so forth, and or I won the election, and this is the kind of strategy, and that at one point immediately, in fact, is because also we have to remember that that was not a school trip. 5 people died in that event. Social media remove Trump from their accounts, and Trump had on Twitter alone 88 million followers. So it is not now we don't have the time and the role to discuss about there is no right and wrong. Many issues at stake that should be considered, but they are very, very important for the future of our democracies. Let me mention, and this is the last thing that I mentioned, that in our effort to promote media literacy, we try to find appealing ways in this case, a metaphor of the food, the content that we digest or not through our screens. There are information that gets it through our eyes, through our ears, into our body. It's like the food that we eat. Is it healthy? Is it something that should be avoided? And again, the idea is going back to the basics. When I say let's encourage people to reflect about those issues, and not only also in a positive way, because I mean it's obvious that the media make and do many great things. So I also want to get to some conclusions. Is link to the disinformation and freedom of expression. I am very glad and that the European Commission and Europe has moved policy into having more regulations about social media and the content that is online. The more general point is, and this debate is also an opportunity to do so, is democracy is the fight for democracy. So is together with trying to have individuals that can improve their well-being, their digital well-being. We have also to take care of our societies and democracies. So the investing in people is what I feel in organization and governments should do, like families invest in the well-being of their children. We are going to have the AVI Conversation 2021 that is again offering one more space to debate on these issues for a month, starting from the 9th of November. And you are very welcome, obviously, to join us. So I don't know whether I ever stop sharing my my screen or if I have ever start to do so. But yeah, I am here available if you have any question or curiosity. Is back to you.
Thank you so much, Paulo. Agradecemos muito ao Paulo Celu pela excelente apresentação. Thanks a lot. E vamos agora para o momento de perguntas e respostas do público. Ao longo das palestras, surgiram dúvidas, questões e comentários interessantes sobre os temas apresentados. Selecionamos algumas. O tempo de resposta será de até 3 minutos por palestrante. So for our international guests, I've just pulled some questions that came from the audience, and I'm going to read them down first in Portuguese, then after in English, and each one of you will have 3 minutes at most to answer. Is that okay? Okay. Okay, let's start.
Okay, vamos.
For the first question, I would like the 3 of you to answer. So it's one question, and the three of you can answer. Okay, we can start with Andy, and then Thomas, and then Paulo. Okay, first in Portuguese. Neste contexto em que vivemos, parece que a desinformação vem acompanhada ou é favorecida por uma política de deboche, cinismo, desprezo pela cultura, educação. Estaremos vivendo uma distopia ou um universo paralelo de 1984, de Orwell? First, in this context in which we live, it seems that disinformation is accompanied or favored by a policy of debauchery, cynism, contempt for culture, education, and life. Are we living in a dystopia or a parallel universe from 1984 by Orwell? Andy, if you can start answering.
So
Okay,
like
yeah.
1984, because disinformation seems to be a good thing for the policy that is well, for policymakers. Is that what the question was?
I'm gonna read the question again, okay?
Yes, I didn't hear
because
it.
you got a bit freeze for me, so I couldn't hear you as well. So I'm gonna read the question again. I think it's gonna be easier. In this context in which we live in, it seems that disinformation is accompanied or favored by a policy of cynicism, contempt for culture, education, and life. Are we living in a dystopia or a parallel universe from 1984 by Orwell? That is the question. Is it hard to understand? Are you mute, Andy?
Yes, I understood the question now. I couldn't hear it the first time around. Okay, thank you very much for repeating it. So are we living in a parallel world, in a dystopia? I don't think so. First of all, because I don't think we're as far in as 1984 in the book portrays. I don't think we're at that stage yet, or I hope we never will be. Secondly, I think if you look at the world's evolution and in our historical evolution, I think there's a lot of things have been much worse in earlier times. If we also look at the spread of information, how it was used politically before this age, well, the disinformation has always been around. So the thing that makes a difference here is that the ways that it can be distributed are much wider, digital. It can go much further. And that the techniques that can be used technology-wise can also go much further. But on the other hand, that means that the people who are fighting this disinformation can also go much further. So I think that we have to trust that there are enough people on this earth that will keep on fighting the good fight for truth and transparency and democracy and progress for as many people as can be, and that the last thing that we can do is lose hope or lose trust and just give up. If you give up, then surely we will be in a dystopia.
Thomas?
Yeah, well, I totally agree with Andy, and I see that there are some, especially when it comes to Big Brother sees you, I see that there are some tendencies that are a bit scary. The possibility today to govern what people do in their lives, in their communication with each other. I think there are multiple threats out there that we need to be aware of, that coming new technology in the wrong hands or in the wrong governments might actually be a real threat to democracy. So I'm also, as Andy, pretty hopeful that there are enough people in the world that actually are working for democracy and for using the potential that we see in the digital world. But if we look at the high hopes that we had in like 10, 15 years ago, today my impression is more mixed. It's not all that democracy will not be winning thanks to social media, democracy might win with some aid of social media, but also with some problems coming with social media. So I think that it's a mixed bag, but I do have some hopes, and I do have hopes for the younger generation growing up, and I have hopes for some of the leaders in the world are actually taking this issue and making it an urgent issue that they're actually focusing on. So, and I see that now also the industry are finally starting to listen and acknowledging that there are problems with platforms as publishers, not just content managers.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's my turn, but probably it is. So I'm optimist by definition, and this doesn't mean that one is silly. I think we have to acknowledge that we are in a new world, and this requires new people. I mean, people with different or more advanced skills, attitude, as we are saying, it will be a fight. I mean, are the governments or some governments fighting for the interest of their citizens? Are some commercial interests antagonist to the citizens of the citizens? For sure, some it is. I mean, the situation is, when Thomas, you mentioned about some private companies are starting to self-regulation, they are indeed, others are not. So there is, I think it was part of the question, there is a need for new policies, new rules, because the liberalism has proven that has some limits. Society by definition has to give themselves rules for the benefit of everyone. So I think that we are in a point in time. We should look at what has happened 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Some hopes is that the Arab Spring and the internet as a place for freedom, and this has changed. Is a certain niche are still available. I mean, is extraordinary how the fact that we can exchange information, share, collaborate with others. No one would want to go back to 20 years ago. But it's true that certain people they are taking advantage of that. And the manipulation, surveillance, privacy, you name it, so we have to develop better individual skills and better skills for our societies. But for sure, we will manage. I had a friend of mine that was saying that we are destined to be successful. There is no alternative. Of course, we will.
Thank you. Okay, next question also.
Ok, a próxima pergunta também para os três responderem. Primeiramente, eu vou ler em português.
E punir os responsáveis sem ferir a liberdade de expressão ou criar leis que possam favorecer ambientes ditatoriais, autoritários. How to curb disinformation and punish those responsible without harming freedom of expression or creating laws that can favor dictatorial, authoritarian environments. That's the question. Can we start with Andy? Did you get?
Yes, I did get it. Yes. No, thank you. That's one of the most difficult questions. The debate between the freedom of speech or the freedom of expression. and censorship or punishing disinformation. I think that's the most difficult part of it, because we see that that there should be more things that we have to do more than what we are doing now, and it can be more better education, it can be more better media literacy or other things, but I don't think that's the only thing that we can do, that we should do. I think we need some regulation, better regulation, and I think we need other initiatives. I think there's three things I'm missing. It's a good regulation. There has been a big push by all kinds of media companies to curb media regulation as much as possible. The problem is when new kinds of players come into play, the regulations that have been diminished a bit also don't count for them. So it's much more difficult to find good regulation there. Secondly is I miss civil society in this. There's a lot of research, there's a lot of education, there's a lot of journalists doing things with this information, but there is no form of civil society that actually takes up this kind of watchdog function against disinformation as a concept, as a phenomenon itself. It's still very splintered, that field. And if you look there at the European level, there's all kinds of, and international level in Europe, there's all kinds of organizations for consumers. They do court cases, they do tests of all kinds of consumer products and all kinds of advertisements. But we don't have this for news and disinformation like we do it there. And we feel there is a need, there has to be somebody who is defending up, taking arms for us against this. And the third thing is the responsibility of politicians, I mean. And if I look at my own country, I think there is a big need, and I have to say, of course, we are not in the same political circumstances than some other countries, but there is a big need for self-regulation by politicians. I think it should, the politicians, parliaments, people who are elected into parliament or have a function as a minister, should be talking about what will we do when somebody lies. There is a very, very small piece of protected speech by parliamentarians when they are talking in parliament, in parliamentarian debate. That is totally protected. They can lie as much as they want at that moment. But at all other times, they are not. There is no regulation that protects them when they are lying. There is also not a lot of regulation that prohibits them to lie. So it's completely about self-regulation there. And I think that's one of the only things that we can do to not go too far in censorship, is that we ask sectors to make very good self-regulation and that, or co-regulation, and that we try to implement that as quickly as we can.
Thank you, Thomas.
I don't have that much to add. It's actually, I think that in general, my sense is that we have laws and they are supposed to be implemented, and to what extent they are enough. I mean, legislation needs to follow and be updated when new threats arrive. So I think that that's one way of doing it. But in general, I think that the matter of disinformation needs to be addressed by all of us and all the actors, but it's primarily a problem of legislation when it comes to the real threats. And I'm not sure. I don't work much with legislation, but I'm thinking that it could be good to just look at the laws that we have already and in what ways they need to be updated. And being in education, I think that it's great that we have an educated population and citizens, but the worst matters or the worst threats and law-breaking activities, etc., should never be part of what we should be putting on the shoulders of our students. That's for the institutions of each country to work with. And censorship, we have old laws, and they are working to some extent, and I think that we need to update them. But then again, I would leave that to the experts in that field to make the call on what needs to be done. I'm the wrong person in this field to answer that question. Sorry.
So, from my side, I agree with most of the things that have been said, but we should. I mean, there's a need for policy, and obviously for good policy. Is the situation is very different from Norway to Italy, from Brazil to Russia to China. So it's very difficult to address the issue with for all. But it's true that citizens are the victims. Whichever things happen is whether it's propaganda, information, is bad policy, is no policy, is or is excessive censorship. We are the one. We, in our capacity as people, whether one is a teacher, a student, an expert, a researcher, or it doesn't really matter at that point, or even a politician, as we said before. So what can be done is truly, I would say again, back to common sense. What would be better for the quality of life of people? People and I think I agree that it's not something that should be put on the shoulders of citizens themselves to be able to defend themselves from propaganda, disinformation, etc., etc. People, maybe they are not capable of doing it. Maybe they don't want to do it. Maybe they don't know how. If we think about moms and dads, where to find guidance. I think Andy was mentioning this before. Is indeed a long-term solution. Education is give a result in long term. So we must invest in education. We must invest in citizenship. We must invest in culture. And those budgets from many countries instead are shrinking. So there is a rhetoric and an alibi in saying that we defend the interest of citizens, but many countries are not doing that. And there must be pragmatically a push. I agree with Andy, the need to have a civil society stronger, but civil society need funding, and that's the problem of it, is so to find some politicians that will position themselves to put forward those issues. And in certain countries is happening already, because at the level and the maturity of democracy is already there. But if we think to other countries, well, is much more complicated. So is again, to be very specific, we need rules, and we need to invest in those sectors that are a bit unpopular for certain politicians. That is education, that will give results when maybe they will not be there anymore. So it's not too convenient to some of them. Again, investing in ourselves, in the people, This is true for Brazil as well. And no, is at one point this critical level of people awareness reach always is the overtone window, etc., a level in which is certain things are not acceptable anymore, and then you change. If you have the Amazon forest that is burning, to which point it will burn is at one point there are alarms and things. Well, let's do something about. Is a bit the simplistic way to say it to address a complex problem, but I don't want to deny our responsibilities. And my responsibility at this stage is we need more rules and investing in education.
Thanks a lot, Paolo. Okay, let's go to the last question. Começa assim. Como esse tema tem sido trabalhado com a população acima de 60 anos? The question is, how has this theme been worked with the population over 60 years old? Again, if we can hear the three of you.
I think we have to acknowledge that there haven't been that much initiatives for senior citizens or for older people. There have been a few projects. We heard some, I think the study from that Thomas presented was already talking about older people as well. We have had a project with several European partners where we wanted to bring young people and older people together in workshops in the free time in socio-cultural activities. The problem was that there was this kind of outbreak of a disease that was very negative for especially older people, so we didn't really bring them together physically with young people in this project. We did do a lot of online contacts there, but it wasn't the project that we had that we wanted to do then in that way. I saw that some other organizations, and I think it was Age Europe and also All Digital, also had a project where older people were targeted, or at least the professionals who work with older people, and they, as well as like we did in the Smart EU project, made a kind of MOOC for people who work with older people, I think. So there are some initiatives. I think in our country, there is also some libraries who work together with a low literacy organization, and that made this kind of an exhibit that you can put up in your library about disinformation. What I also like with this organization is they have this kind of, how do you call this, a bicycle with a that you can load with all kinds of stuff. So it has something in front where you can put items in. I have one for my children, but they do it with this kind of mobile cafe. And they go to a library, they open the thing, they get some deck chairs out, and they have a coffee machine in it, and they start talking about digital literacy with all kinds of people. And they can also talk about this information. So there are some initiatives, but not enough at all.
Yes, and I can just say the same thing. That's what we've been seeing as well in the Swedish context, that older people have been excluded, but for the most part, all people have been excluded when it comes to education about this, because education is something that you do when you're young. We have, however, seen that the situation among older people is not as bad as one thought initially. So older people are not necessarily more easy to fool than younger people. But then again, we see the same class divide here as in other groups. So the problem that we have about the digital inequalities are only partly explained by age. It's more explained by resources, educational background, and not least the curiosity factor. The ones who are interested and stay updated by themselves, they are, no matter what age you are, you will know what is happening and how to navigate this. But on the other hand, you see that some people are actually left outside society and not following what is going on much. And as you go older, it might be even more difficult to follow what is happening. So there are some initiatives, and as Andy said, through libraries, also some municipalities are trying now to bring new technology to the older people so that they can start using it more. I think that they are a part that has been neglected a bit, but it's coming to terms with this a bit. I know that Internet Stiftelsen in Sweden is working hard right now, and we have public service trying to have specially designed programs directed towards older people and digital literacy.
Yeah, well, obviously more than 50 means 60, 70, 80, so there are different age groups there. And as Thomas, you say, it depends very much on the social background, economics, and or education. That maybe is even a more crucial factor, but that's for sure is in the south of Europe, for instance, they are more than neglected. There is very, very, very little. The fact, I think, that is not an interesting typology of consumer is and then we go back to the media society or the consumer society is if they don't receive those services or training in the way that they will be effective is because no one is providing them. And again, going back to parents and children, for instance, if you go, I was talking to my children, and now some of them are a bit grown up, but if you go to a playground, is here in Brussels, so you see 10 different or 15 different nationalities and Arabic, French, Italian, English, Norwegian, but the mom and dads, they behave all the same. They all care for their children in the same way. At the same time, is one of my kids was saying, look, the children are playing and the parents are with their telephone on the bench. So how can I mean, it's not a good example. Somebody should take care of the parents as well.
todos os palestrantes. Chegamos ao final, gente, do nosso Seminário Internacional Educação Midiática e o Combate à Desinformação, o papel da arte. Foram 2 dias muito proveitosos, cheios de informações e reflexões relevantes. Agradecemos a todas e todos os palestrantes, tradutores, equipe de produção e também a você que nos acompanhou aí pelo YouTube. Agradecemos novamente a Eunice Brasília, Associação dos Institutos Culturais, Embaixadas e Consulados de países membros da União Europeia, presidida este ano pela Embaixada da Itália, pela Delegação da União Europeia no Brasil, em parceria com a Aliança Francesa de Brasília, Instituto Cervantes de Brasília, Goethe-Zentrum Brasília, Instituto Camões, Centro Cultural Português em Brasília, embaixadas da Alemanha, Bélgica, Eslovênia, França, Finlândia, Itália, Polônia, Portugal e Suécia. Centro Universitário IESB, Faculdade de Comunicação Social da Universidade de Brasília e Decanato de Extensão da UNB, com a coordenação da IANDE Comunicação e Educação. Olha, o evento acabou, mas todas as apresentações ficam disponíveis permanentemente aqui.
The presentations are going to be released in the YouTube of Semana da Europa. Also, it is also worth to say that the event of the communication briefly, we will have also an ebook that is going to be connected with the text previously exposed in the website of Semana da Europa and partners. More information you can see with educacalmediatica.com.br. It is also worth to reinforce the weekly of Europe can be aware with all of the programming through the site www.semanadaeuropa.com. We wish you all an excellent afternoon and see you soon.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. You were great.
Okay.